You're listening to the Canned Fruit Podcast with your favorite trio, Danielle, Jess, and Kia. We will have meaningful conversations on what it looks like to have compassion and respect when communicating with others. This show is a safe and brave space to open up, so let's start.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Canned Fruit, where we talk about candid and fruitful conversations. Yay! I'm here with two of my favorite people on this earth, Miss Danielle and Miss Jessica.
Oh, feelings mutual.
You should see my dance, y'all.
It's great.
It's a beautiful dance.
I love it.
We've been getting into some pretty heavy things. Last episode, we talked a little bit about emotions and feelings. And even though some of us weren't really going to get into that, we did. We did anyway.
Some of us.
I can't help but feel. I have feelings about feelings.
Yeah, we learned about meta feelings.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been going through a lot of the foundation of these conversations, and something that we haven't really hit on yet, but have maybe talked about a little bit, is setting limits and setting expectations. So when you're having these difficult conversations, when you're trying to be candid and fruitful, that doesn't mean it's no holds barred. We can say whatever we want to say. We can do whatever we want to do. I mean, that could be the limit you set, that there are no limits. But most conversations, especially in the difficult realm, especially in the challenging realm, you're going to want to set some limits or some boundaries. Now, when considering these limits and boundaries, you could do something a little more proactive or a little reactive. Thinking on some of the difficult conversations you have had, Jessica and Danielle, do you find yourself more proactive or reactive? And what does that look like for you?
I think, just as a person in general, I am more reactive than I am proactive. Okay. But I'm trying to be more proactive. I think it's so hard to figure out like what a boundary is. I don't think I even really thought about boundaries until the pandemic, when I suddenly started having subject matter overload. When I started being like, I need to set a boundary for this particular subject, I started to have a little bit of anxiety about like the numbers and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably the first time that I ever felt like I had a boundary that had been crossed.
Like, I think encroaching on everything in my life, I'm going to need a bit more space.
Exactly. I think that I hold a lot of space for tough things. And so it's hard for me to get to a boundary for myself. So that was really the first one that I noticed, that I was like, like I'm starting to feel bad when I'm taking in that information, when I'm getting news articles sent to my phone, and when every time I open my phone, that's what I see. Everything on the TV is about it. It was like seeing it even outside, like they were building the Nightingale Hospital and I can see it from my living room. Like it was just like very invasive. That was the first time that I was like, this is very heavy. And I also am realizing I have a limit for this.
Yeah. I resonate with that. I don't see boundaries clearly at all. I tend to be a defender of other people's boundaries. If I see an altercation and I see someone overstepping, I'm like, whoa, hold up, swole up. That's inappropriate.
Yeah.
What I realized too is that I have been an encroacher of boundaries, but just because I don't have them, it's harder for me to see where other people have them.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's not like I'm trying to encroach on your boundary, Kia, and may or may not have done that in the past. But it's generally because I have such a low barrier for entry. Now,
yes.
I just want to put a little caveat on that.
Okay.
Barrier to entry in terms of friendships and like who gets into my core circle. I know this is a little bit different, but when I said that, I just want to make the distinction. I can have a low threshold for boundaries and still not let everyone in my inner circle. But those two things are different, because if you're out in the outer circle, it's probably easier. It would be thought of that it's easier for me to tell you no. But what I tend to do is just not engage with people that will do things that make, what do I want to say here? I'm just having it. This is how hard boundaries are for me, because it's really just hard for me even to express how they happen. They happen so happenstance. There's not a real guideline or matrix of like, this is my boundary. And so I'm just learning how to, like, even whenever somebody's like, the power of no. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to say no to everything. And then someone asked me to go to brunch after I said I wasn't eating out. And I'm like, yes, because you want to go to lunch and I like you. And to keep this friendship, so little things can be that small. Like, and so what I end up being is muddled. So you know how you're asking, like, are you proactive or reactive? I'm actually neither. I'm just confused in the middle. And my friends, I have some friends here that have literally, I would be the closest thing I could be, which was extremely annoying to them, was that I could be hashtag I'm a maybe. That's what they would call me. They were like, Danielle is hashtag I'm a maybe. And that was what I would do to create some space for myself. I'd say maybe. I don't know if it's yes. I don't know if it's no, but I'm going to say maybe because you matter to me and I don't want to say nothing. The people that matter a little bit less just get me ghosting them.
Oh God.
Yeah. Here we are, Kia. Ooh, could it get any more
honesty?
honest?
I like it.
That's all I got.
We're being
today.
honest and authentic here. That's what we're being. So I'll say, so I think at least I see, here we go, in not being as comfortable being proactive, or not even necessarily realizing to be proactive. I guess I would see you as more reactive, and this is for both of you.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you're saying that you don't even realize, I guess maybe necessarily that you needed a boundary, or even how high that boundary is. I didn't realize until we started, so I started doing some introspection via Enneagram, that I had such distinct and firm boundaries. Like, it wasn't something I wasn't able to put a name to it until I realized, oh, I have these boundaries. Not only do I have the boundaries for just interacting with people or who I'm giving energy to, that's the biggest boundary. Like, are you, I hate saying the word worthy enough, but are you important enough to me to garner energy? Like, to respond to you, maybe me doing some additional research so that we can talk about something more. So even entering a conversation with somebody, like, I had a boundary for that. Wow. Which conversations I would enter in with you. So is one of the things, like, what's it called? Sectionalization, but that's not the word I want to say.
Compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization, there we go. Very easily compartments. Like, right now, even Jessica and Danielle, like, are in, let's see, Jessica's in at least two. Yeah, they're both in at least two compartments. And I've figured out what to do with that.
Wait,
but
I've got to tee out. I got to tee out for a second. I just want to make sure that I'm also in two compartments.
I've entered into two compartments.
No, like, I said both of you.
Oh,
so
okay.
happy.
I was about to be like, wait, can I at least get two compartments?
No, you're in two, like, at least two compartments, where it's like this group, like, you're in the podcast compartment, and then you're in the Enneagram compartment, and then you're kind of in, like, the work compartment, and then Danielle's in the Black moms compartment, and then there's like,
this makes sense.
Can we make a pitch? Oh, this is completely irrelevant to the show, but can we make a pitch for being in the friend compartment? Like,
how do we get in?
So there is no friend compartment. It's you're my friend. In this compartment, you are my friend.
Oh, so there's a running line there.
Subcompartment.
Yeah, there's a running friends line.
Okay.
And all the running friends get energy.
To all our listeners, this was vital. Continue, Kia. I apologize.
No, it's fine. But yeah, I realized I have these compartments, and that people go in, and when they cross compartments, like, I get a little, I guess, nervous because I'm like, well, I shared this in this compartment, or they are in both of these compartments, and I don't want them telling this compartment about this other thing. And it literally could, because for me, it could be something so little. Like, even as I was saying it, I was thinking, do I want to tell Danielle that she's in the Black mom's compartment? And I was like, yeah, no, I mean, she's Black and a mom, so we'll just just let her know that she's in that compartment.
Newsflash.
Guys, this
makes sense though. This makes sense. I mean, so what I'm hearing is that one of your biggest boundaries is privacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's what that says to me, that you like to hold these people in their little compartment.
Facts about me.
Yes.
And you know these facts about me. And together you will never know those two facts together. Right. You are in the compartments that don't meet.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna
now, do you let other people know that?
Yeah.
No, like if they're listening to it, this is probably the first time some people are like, oh, and now they'll be like, Kia, what compartment am I in?
I know, I was like,
and they might never find out because I can decide whether or not I want to tell that.
Well, isn't that a boundary though, right? Like even the way you said that is just like, and they don't have to find out.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty firm. I'm firm when I decide that I do or don't want to tell you something. I do or I don't tell you. Like, there's no convincing me to do something I don't want to do.
See, I really appreciate that because I identify with that very rarely. And I wish that that's something I could do more frequently. I wish that I could be that way more often because I see how it works. I'm like, wow, that worked out really well. Like that I just have the power to not share information. Mm-hmm. Right?
Ooh. It's just, again, I love these moments where we see ourselves in like, wow, this is really not my great space. Just this, because even like one of the examples that Kia reminded me of was that one time we were plotting our days of when we would get together and record. And it was like, I think I was even asking what day works for everybody else. And then
guaranteed.
And then finally everyone's like, well, whatever, maybe evenings. And I was like, I can't do evenings anymore because they're just make me, I feel all these feelings about it. And I felt so, I guess in that moment, I didn't feel bad. I felt proud that I could finally say that. I felt good that I was in a safe environment where I trusted that people would hear me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I find it so powerful when I can hear people. When people say no, I find it so powerful. Less so when they say no to me, but definitely even in those moments, you're just like, wow, well, that gives me permission to say no to all the stuff I said yes to you about 5 days ago. So let's revisit that. And it shouldn't be reactive in that way. I guess you're right. I mean, not, I guess, I know you're right, Kia. As I say that through, it's like needing that permission to say no versus just saying no. And I feel like, especially for where I am in life right now, I feel like that has been really, really helpful. The moments when I do it, I find it so powerful. I feel like people are clear. I feel like people's interpretation of me doesn't really change. If anything, they're like, okay, Danielle has said a no, and we need to respect that. It's very rare that it happens in this way that I think historically I thought of. It was like, oh, everyone's going to be so mad at me. Yeah. It's going to be such a situation if I say no. And it's easier for me to control what I do, not even control, for me to be malleable here than to make this a really big situation, even if I don't want to do it. I think, that just comes with age, I think, too, for me.
Mm-hmm. What I love is that you just described a boundary that helps bring connection, where I feel like a lot of my boundaries are not to bring. I don't necessarily know that I want to bring disconnection, but it definitely encourages it. And I love that, for our listeners, Danielle has set a proactive boundary. She was explicit with us. and said, hey, I have these feelings when we record in the evening. I would prefer if we could record at a different time. Didn't change anything for us. We're just like, okay,
yeah, okay,
no evenings. And so even when I proposed evenings, I put in there, but I know that you said that you don't want to do them. So if you don't, just don't. She set that boundary so that when she communicated to us, when she communicated that to us, when I communicated back, I could say, hey, this is when I'm free, but I understand if this is not one of the times you select. So in our conversations, it helps, just garner that connection. I know how you feel. And at that point, it didn't change anything. But mine are like, you stay in your group and you never leave your group. And if you leave your group, I start to get nervous.
And I set even more boundaries.
Yeah. And then there's a new boundary.
So can I just throw out a little bit of a thought I just had?
Okay.
So when we first talked about this, we used the word expectations and boundaries, and then we'll bring it back to conversation, right? But
yeah,
when you say limits, interesting, me and my semantics, limits are great, but then sometimes do people use them as walls, right? Because I think there's something to be said about having the power to say no. I think there's something else to be said about utilizing that to protect yourself from not engaging with people in a certain way. Let me rephrase, engaging with them in a way that needs to happen, right? And yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's not a fully formed thought. So if you want to finish your.
Well, just when Kia said, because not going down the therapy route, but it does sound like there's a fear. There's a fear there behind these two groups mixing. And so do I think you have the right to set boundaries? Yes. Should people respect those boundaries? Yes. Yeah. But the thing about knowing yourself is like pulling all these other things we've been talking about. If you know yourself and you know why you're saying that no, the answer might be that there's fear behind those two groups seeing you in different lights. That's my projected analysis from my 0 days in therapy school, if that's what it's even called. But I definitely think that there's something to be said about knowing your why, because that's what we talked about before, is like, why are you saying no? You don't have to convey that to everyone else. You don't even have to share that here, Kia, but I just want us to be careful as we explore boundaries and make sure that we're not allowing those boundaries to transcend into walls that create separation and disconnection.
The thing about boundaries is they're personal, but they also don't only affect you. Right? So you get to choose who you give energy to. But you don't get to choose if your relationships suffer because of that, because the other person needs more energy or whatever, right? So, and that's, I think, where it kind of like bleeds into this expectation word that we chose, where you can set an expectation in your relationships that another person, that you need more of another person to maintain the relationship, right? Like, and so this dynamic, it requires both people to have boundaries and both people to not have such strict boundaries that they're no longer participating in the relationship. I think, is that kind of what you're saying, Danielle? How like, you can make a boundary, you can make it, and it might be because it might be for whatever reason you genuinely don't have the energy, you need that break in the evening, whatever it is, but you don't get to decide how other people react to that boundary. The boundary is about you.
I mean, this should be obvious. I feel like it's bad sometimes when I point out obvious points, but in all of our conversations and all of our recordings, I feel like the lesson that comes through the most is that we focus a lot on ourselves and what we need as we have conversations in general, but especially difficult ones. And we need to spend, if not the same, at least some energy on what our conversation partner needs.
Mm-hmm.
Or not on what they need, and considering that. What are their boundaries? What are their expectations? If we don't know, being honest, being open, asking them for that. And also just being honest and being open and offering that to them. Hey, can we have this, similar to our conversation about setting the right environment? I would love to talk more about this. Can we do this tomorrow? Can we do this later today? Can we do this after lunch if you realize this conversation cannot be good if I'm hungry while we have it, right? And so just for everybody to remember that your needs are important. What you need in the conversation is important. It is valid, but also consider the other side of that. Consider who's receiving it and what they need. And what they need.
Well, because the thing that we said in the, like, one of the very first episodes was, when you're having a conversation, it's between two people. You can't have a conversation alone. That's a monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've assessed in this kind of like step chart that will come through, if you've assessed that this person is important enough to have a conversation with, right, then their feelings matter, right?
Yeah.
Now, those feelings don't get to alter. And so this is the power of the no in my mind, because as I hear you talking about it, Kia, like, I want to just respect that you still have the right to say no.
Right.
But to Jessica's point, I think that's what I'm learning, is that I relinquished my power of no for the hope of keeping those I love happy. And now it's a matter of, okay, one, my value is not attached in that way. So that's a whole separate conversation. But then there's the fact that my no, I'm saying it because it's important to me. And if this person values me, then they would revalue what's important to me. And in this moment, I need to keep this line. This is simple things like the lunch, right? This is simple things like meetings in the evening. We're not talking, and this is the thing about when we talk about difficult conversations, it's not always like race, gender, politics. Like sometimes it's like, do you want to go for lunch? And I'm like, it's frozen.
Yes.
I know, it's frozen. And so I do think that this is this really understanding, because it's like almost like expectations is like the conversation. And I still kind of go back to the individual where it's like, okay, why am I saying no? Because I need to validate it back to myself, because I'm not as experienced as you are, Kia, in the no. So I go back and I say, I'm saying no because I remembered that I committed this to myself. And that's important to me. I could tell you all no to the evenings because I said, I need to limit the evenings I'm on the Zoom camera.
Yeah.
For my family. That's important to me. That's important enough for me to sacrifice the relationship. And for me, it goes that extreme. Like that's how far I have to go to be able to say no. Am I willing to sacrifice this relationship for this no? And that's why so few things rise. Because like a lot of times, like, no, I don't want to sacrifice, especially if you're my circle, right? If you're Joe Schmo on the street, probably not. But if it's you too, then I don't want to sacrifice that. And really growing into the space of, saying no doesn't sacrifice the relationship. Saying no to this conversation before I eat lunch doesn't mean the conversation will never happen or it's the demise of our relationship. Again, knowing who you're talking to, though, if you know me well enough, you'll know that that's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
And you might be able to speak to the fact of like, hey, Danielle, I'm setting this boundary. And I know you have a hard time setting boundaries. And that doesn't mean anything about how much I care about you. That sounds, I know for some people they're like, who is this girl? She's crazy. But I do think that in a conversation, if this is a closer conversation, again, knowing your audience, which you're now probably in a personal relationship, maybe not one at work or something, or who knows, maybe even, right? Maybe brave space. But I do think it could be interesting if someone knew me well enough. That's something that I'd welcome. Hearing them say, I'm setting this boundary, but this has nothing to do with you. This is about me. And I still love you. That's a powerful statement. Might not be the everyday conversation, but I think in the moments where that's happened, it's helped me remember that, oh, this isn't about me. And
Well,
I can
think
respect the boundary.
That's a boundary in its best, right?
Yeah.
That's a boundary at its best, is saying like, I'm setting this boundary and it's for me. The boundary is for me. It's not because of you. It's not for our relationship. It's for me. It's protecting something for me. And I wonder, as you were saying that, I wonder how you feel when other people set boundaries. Like, do you think that you're talking about how when you set a boundary, it feels as if you're going to have to sacrifice the relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel that way when other people set a boundary to you? Because I have extreme reactions when other people set boundaries. And I'm wondering if that's because I'm really poor at setting them for myself. I'm trying to figure out what it is about that
so
I have like an instant reaction when other people set boundaries.
So the thing I love about you, Jessica, is that you've not said what that reaction is. So whatever I say is not tainted by yours. So we'll play there. Interestingly enough, I am moderate to pretty good with people setting boundaries. My initial gut reaction might be like, for real? But then I kind of go back and I'm just like, no, that makes sense. I'm very quick to go back. That makes sense. Calm down. We're fine. No big deal. That's the irony of it, right? Because I see other people's value. I see other people's ability to say no. Not once has somebody said, no, I don't want to say not once, but it's not often that someone says no to me and then it's like the demise of our relationship. It's more often than not, absolutely nowhere near that. So it's my own mental space that brings me there when it's mine. I know, Key, you were trying to say something. I jumped in there.
No, because I want to listen more to see if maybe my question gets answered. I'll still ask it though, which is, so you mentioned that you set that expectation or you set that boundary, and in your thoughts it's, am I willing to sacrifice this other relationship? And I wonder, do you also consider whether that person respects you? Like, if they don't accept your boundary, it's not just because you're willing to sacrifice the relationship, but also I don't think you're actually testing them, but almost like a test, like, do you accept me? Do you accept my boundaries? Do you respect me? Type of thing.
Last episode, we were questioning my manipulativeness. Okay, now today we're saying that I'm testing.
Listen, it's not just you.
I'm just saying, listeners, this is what I have to deal with. No, I agree with you on. I actually don't think of it as a test. More often than not, I'm just too afraid to say no, which is really funny because anyone that knows me knows like they all will like say no, and I will, but that's often, I'm usually the defender of others, right? So in the context where people see me kind of being rah, big energy, and if you're taking
for myself,
it's not for myself. It's not for myself, or I'm backed against the wall and I'm in defensive mode, and then I can show up in a big bombastic way because I have to protect myself. Like I'm in fight or flight mode, and Danielle fights, right? And so when I'm pushed up against the wall, that's what I have to do. But in a day-to-day kind of light question, what do I want to do kind of place, it's not really a test, because it's like I just don't want to make other people unhappy. And so just to the other thing that Kia was saying, what I've also, now that I'm getting better at this, it's no longer the extreme of, well, I have to sacrifice this friendship. Now it is what people say this all the time, is it a yes for myself? And so now the weight is the no to you, a yes to myself.
I like that.
Yeah.
Is a no to this conversation, a yes for my being able to have a better conversation with you later. That is the balance. There's still that how you value yourself in relation to other people here that will get affected in that. So you have to hold yourself to a high enough value to make that subtle difference work. But I'm getting better at that. So now this conversation is more like, if I say no to these two awesome women, it's not no to them, it's no to this specific moment with them, so that I can say yes to a calmer evening for myself. And I actually tend to show up better for these awesome women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's that, and I guess just from a listener perspective, this does, like, I can feel it kind of going into these amorphous spaces a bit, but this is what conversation is, right? Like, you have these moments where we keep saying it's a conversation with yourself before you have a conversation with another person. And so if you don't think about all this stuff, how can you have the conversation to say, I'm holding the line calmly, without being backed up against the wall, without having to like be explosive, even to our feelings point? Like, how do we convey the feeling within reason, in a respectful manner? You know, like, all these conversations have to happen to have the conversation.
And on the receiving end too, right? Like, if I was to receive someone else's boundary, if I don't stand in that self-confidence of like their boundary isn't about me, like to not take it as a personal attack, you're already set up for failure, right? So you have to enter into the conversation with great self-awareness on both ends of the conversation. Not just I'm about to have a boundary, but I could be on the receiving end of someone else's boundary. And I need to be okay with that.
You're so right.
That's where I struggle. I'm saying that because that's something I struggle with, is standing in that, like, not taking it personally when other people have a boundary that I think affects me. No, it doesn't. The boundary is for them.
Mm-hmm.
So do you
think it's not
think
a personal attack?
It's easier to think through, well, I'll still ask it. Do you think it's easier to think through things like this when it's something proactive, when you are setting the boundary before the conversation, before the event, before whatever it is, compared to you're in the conversation? Like, do you take time to pause and think inside of the conversation? If someone says, this is making me very upset, can we come back to this later? So this is more of a reactive limit, a reactive boundary, saying, I would love to continue this, but I know right now the conversation might be full of curse words, and I don't want to do that to you. I want to have a nice civil conversation with you. Do you so do you take time to pause when you get that reactive boundary, or is it later? Maybe they've left the conversation, because for me, if I set the boundary and said, I don't want to talk about this now, then I'm not talking about it now. That's just not going to happen. But then maybe later, in my example, you're able to recognize, wow, they wanted to show up better for me. And so they do want to talk about this later.
I'm pretty good at receiving reactive boundaries. I actually really like them. I think they're very powerful, but there has to be follow through. If you say, like, we need to talk about this later, like, I can tell, like, we're raising our voices at each other. We need to take a minute to decompress and think about this on our own and not continue to pick at each other, and we'll come back to it. There has to be follow through for me. I'm pretty good on the receiving end of those. I'm not as good at giving reactive boundaries out unless I have recently relearned. It's something that I constantly have to remind myself, kind of like those active listening steps. Like, I constantly have to research. Okay, what does that look like? How can I be kind to my partner when I don't feel like being kind to my partner? When I really just need to set a boundary.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you have better. Do you think you have better responses to reactive boundaries because that's your comfort, or is it just you are more easily able to recognize it?
I think I take them less personally. I think because I recognize that those frequently happen in a heated moment, I'm less likely to take it personally. And so for a proactive boundary, I'm more likely to be like, how does this affect the friendship kind of thing? Like, what have I done? to be on the receiving end of this. But in a reactive boundary, I'm more likely to attribute the boundary to the situation rather than
Like,
the
it's
person or
obvious it's
me.
about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remembered that this is funny the way you say that, Jessica, is that I am really good at dishing out reactive boundaries. I am horrible at receiving them. I am great at receiving proactive boundaries. I am horrible at dishing them out. And so it just, as we like walk through these different versions of this, like I could pause the conversation. You know what? At the moment, I think it's best that we pause this conversation.
Totally.
Okay. Yeah. But if someone does it to me, later. I'm like, no, we're not done. We are not done. No. We are absolutely not done. Actually,
I was just getting started.
And you've now pissed me off even more. See, I told you, everyone listening, see, I told you that this is not, we are learning. Growing. Yes.
Still growing.
We are growing.
We're going to grow every day.
In some places, where we are, people. Very slowly. But yeah, so I just want to name that because I see myself, the power of a reactive, when I see the power when I'm the one seeing the conversation go awry and I want to direct it. And it's not like I didn't think of it as a power move until I just described it that way. And it does sound like a power play.
It is.
But because I think it's helpful when I'm doing it, but I'm so emotional when I'm on the receiving end of it. Like if we're in a heated debate and someone else stops it, I'm just like, but I'm still here. And that's often how I feel.
I'm
even
still
the way
heated.
Yes, I'm still in this moment. And now you're leaving me. Right. There's this like, you're leaving this conversation. You're leaving me here and oftentimes we've both risen this moment. This moment has risen to this level because of both of us.
Yes.
And now you're exiting it. Like that is where my mind goes. And so again, this is an angle of a boundary where I think they're important. When I come back to that, when that person comes back to me again, I hear you on, there needs to be a revisit, we revisit this moment. Yeah. I'm usually calm, but I think one of you said that there's like, it's like an optimal moment. Yeah. It's an optimal way. I think the optimal is that there's communication in that I know you're still upset. Like there's recognition of where I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we can exit it together. Like and again, I'm thinking of a loving, supportive friendship relationship where someone wants to take your hand and doesn't want you to live there. There are some people, again, this is hard because there's so many angles. Like this could be, again, coming from a place where both parties are invested in a positive conversation and it's just difficult at this moment. My hope is that you could see the situation getting heated. I see us getting heated. I don't want us to communicate this way. I think we need to pause. We should pause. And I know you don't want to, but I'm pausing because I need to revisit this at a later time. That's different than I'm out. Like that's
it is.
It's really different. Even though that person has the right to have that boundary, it's the same boundary being held. It's a really different way of saying, I need space and time to process this. I see your pain, Jessica. I see your frustration, Kia. I respect it and I'm not ignoring it.
Yeah.
But I just can't do this right now. I'll come back to you later. I'll come back to you tomorrow. I'll come back to you in a week.
So my hang up, I'll own my hang up is the commitment to revisit. I still have a commitment to the outcome of this conversation. It sounds like your hang up is more the validate your feelings. Like I understand. Or is it a combination of both? Or
because I have lived through I'll come back to this and then they never come back to this kind of thing. I have a bit of a righteous stance there. I'm more like, you wrong for that. Don't do that. That's just not an adult move. That's not us being an adult, right? So for the sake of this conversation, that's not my hang up because I think if you're doing that, that's your issue.
Yeah.
And you need to figure that out because we said we would talk about this. And if you can't come back to it, that's not me. So I have a right to be upset if in my righteousness there. On this side, yes, it's very much so. Can you validate? I'm very much so in need of people not ignoring that we both came to this heated moment together. You said something and I said something and we're both here. And it's very rare that the stereotypically calm person didn't say anything to agitate the stereotypically agitated person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not going to take responsibility for all of that. Right.
Right.
Like,
and I think
both here together.
Yeah.
And owning that we in our both of our actions in some things, whether there are misinterpretations and all of that, just respecting that those emotions are there. They don't, again, to our point about feelings, you don't have to reflect them. You don't have to consume them and assume those feelings, but there is a little bit of like, can we just respect that we got here together?
I'll definitely say that that's been my biggest growth, but like you just described all of my growth. Well, part of my growth there.
We know, Pia.
The first of all, coming back, because I'll pretend like we're going to talk about it later. We're going to talk about it again.
I'm just saying that to get out of here.
Yeah, because I just want this to end. And that's how I make it end. And I'll say coming back to it is scary. It's just really scary, but has been so refreshing. It's not the right word. Enlightening is not the right word. It's just been good when you actually come back, because it's resolved then. After we come back and we talk about it and we've had time to think about it, maybe our opinion has changed, or at least now I can think a little bit more about what you've said and I can come back to it. We can talk and have some form of resolution where, again, the resolution might not be that we agree, but it's resolved. And I love that now, instead of it's just like always in the air. And it's just like, oh man, are they going to bring it up today? Because I'm not bringing it up ever.
Oh, I just made a note for a future episode. We got to talk about resolution, Kia, because I am maybe boundaries might not be my thing, but I think that is a huge, important one. Like, we got to clear this up, but I don't want to distract too much, but I just want to double down that's a really important part of a conversation.
Resolution or coming back to it is one, definitely a big one, because as everyone learned last episode, I'm the stereotypically non-emotive, straight-faced. I mean, you could be yelling at me and I could keep a straight face. And it kind of, I would feel righteous in the fact that I did not contribute to any of this buildup. What are you talking about? I have my even emotion. Like, I'm not yelling. I am using an even tone, and I have brought out all of the pertinent facts. I have in no way contributed to the fact that you are upset, and I might be actually livid, but I'm not going to yell about it. So I'm the better person, and you need to think about something, and I love, again, I have grown from that and accepted that no matter how I could Ben Stein it, and I'm still contributing to the conversation, to the point that the conversation has gotten to. If it's a true dialogue, we have both contributed. And recognizing that, I love the way you phrase it, because I wouldn't have phrased it like that we both contributed to this point, and acknowledging how we both feel, like even just saying that part out loud, naming it, is very important, and definitely has been another part of my growth in conversations.
I'm just, I always would tell my partner, I would say, every action has a reaction, and inaction is an action. That's always been my thought process here. So, but Kia, you had a really good quote aligned with all of this that I think we should visit.
Yeah, because I think as we're talking about setting the limits, I think we should also talk about setting the expectations. But I saw this quote from Oprah. So I feel like every episode we've got, just like an amazing person. And actually, I'll say I went out of my way to try and not find a Brene Brown quote. not because I don't love Brene, but because I was like, other people have said things too. Other people speak words. But Oprah, she says, you have to be able to set boundaries. Otherwise, the rest of the world is telling you who you are and what you should be doing, you can still be a nice person and set boundaries. Like maybe I should have opened with this. And it goes a little bit back to what I was saying about boundaries, creating connection rather than detracting from the connection, and setting the boundaries, still being a nice person, still wanting to be active and part of that relationship, active and part of the discussion, but knowing what you need. And I think that gets into a little bit of the expectations of a conversation. And the easiest example I can think about when setting expectations in a conversation is something that I do now. And I didn't think that I could just ask this, but just like, sometimes you think you can't set this boundary, but I didn't think I could just ask this in a conversation. And I love it now. Like I ask it all the time, which is, do you want me to listen to help you, or are you just venting? And initially when I first heard about this, I guess, technique, I thought that maybe it would come off as kind of like condescending, maybe like, do you need help or are you just complaining? Like that's kind of what it sounded like to me in my
Semantics.
head at first. Like
not what you said.
I know, but it's like I would hear it like that. Like, do you need help or are you just complaining? Like, what do you want? But it just, even to the rephrasing and just saying it like that. Do you want me to listen and provide some feedback and some help? Or do you want me to just listen about the situation? Depending on the situation, it might depend how I phrase it, but I always make sure that I'm not phrasing it in a way that might make it seem more condescending. And let me tell you, it's like freeing, because I went into every conversation, and let me know if this was you. I went into every conversation thinking that there needed to be a solution. Like you weren't just, venting to me. You weren't just explaining the situation to me. It was like, you're explaining the situation and you expect for me to come up with a way to resolve it. And
you assumed your role.
I assumed that role immediately. Like I am the problem solver. What about y'all?
So again, I always got to be special. So I do think that there are different populations of my life where those conversations would work differently. When it was with, it's so weird. I love my girlfriends, my really, really close friends, right? I love them to bits, but I guess I just let them live their lives. So yeah, I tend to be the optimal, I say that and they're going to send it like, she's not that great. I tend to be the optimal kind of soundboard, because I do a dance of I really want to understand, I'm empathetic, I get it. And then we're providing solutions only based on their cues, right? And my husband and my kids, not the case. I am a fixer. I am like, who did what? What's their name? Let's do it. It's like, I just assume that role. So as much as I thought we'd be on opposing places here, Kia, I can totally see the need to, I actually don't love the question that you phrased, just beyond, that wasn't the best way to say that. I think I don't always get, I think it's a really good step in the right direction. I have been now presented with that question, being married to someone that's more your demeanor, and I respect the effort. I don't necessarily know if it's the same thing as someone being aware, because I might not think I need to fix it, but if you're now in full listening mode and you're just not saying anything, and I've shifted in the midst of the conversation and you weren't aware of that shift.
See, I think it's a good way to practice.
Yes.
This question is a good way to practice. If you're not naturally a good observer in conversation or good at emotional intelligence, this is a great place to start, to be like, what role am I playing in this conversation? That's what this question is, right? What do you need me to show up to do in this conversation? Because if you're not good at getting those cues from other people, this is a great place to start. But some people are very naturally good at that, at being like, okay, I was a listener, now she needs a solution.
I just want to
and the thing is, I see the list, as a listener, I'm still actively listening. As a listener, I don't just get to now sit back and kind of ignore you or just let it roll over me. Even though you said, I don't, I just really want to vent, I still should be offering you feedback. This should still be a conversation. They shouldn't be monologuing at me while I just go,
very good distinction, Kia.
Yeah.
Very good distinction. Because that was what was hard. That's my issue with the question. I just want to note, yes, Jessica, this is a great starting point, but framed in that lens, Kia, then the question is fantastic then, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not allowing the person to just like disengage.
Check out.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So I find it, and it could be phrased better, but I just always find it as a great starting point, because now I know, okay, wow, my husband's just venting to me. I can listen to it. I can, provide my active listening feedback, but I don't have to go, and this is what we need to do next. After this, we're writing an email. This is what the email needs to say. Like that's how I go.
Straight into game plan.
I mean, that line, I'm with you. Yeah. Can I just note though, that the expectation part, even if it's not, in a conversation, but there is this ability for people that are more like me that have a harder time like saying the no, is like saying it. It's like almost to your point earlier, it's an advanced expectation. So it's, what do you need out of this conversation? It's the, what would you like to do? Here's my availability, right? Like setting up these framings so that you're almost like you're speaking what you need first so that the other person can respond is another way that I've found. Again, it might be a tactic, like to your point, Jessica, it might be like a first step, but that's kind of how I've navigated it as well. Like I need to, hey, during Lent, I'm going to not be eating out. So FYI, this eating out thing is a big situation for me. Just deal with it. but it's just like conveying in advance that there's an expectation that I'm not going to be doing this thing. So it's an expectation of your boundary, kind of.
I love that. To just be proactive about that conversation. Like, this is where I stand. Like, if you're the first one to like break or breach the taboo subject, somehow it becomes easier for people to talk about.
Yeah.
So if you're the first one to be like, I don't know why you're not eating out, Danielle. So if you're the first one to say like, these are my expectations, this is what I'm doing. It makes it easier for other people to converse.
Two things. One, I'm not eating out because I want a summer body, and it's already or hopefully this may be released. Hopefully we'll see when it's released. Maybe I would have got it. Second of all, like I think it is this kind of, there's so much bravery that we talk about throughout each of these episodes about conversation. There's a need to kind of like be brave to say what you're feeling, be brave to set your expectations and set your limits, be brave to be brave enough to see someone who's different from you and respect their humanity, right? Like, there's just so much.
No, we're going to have to talk about bravery.
I know.
Add that to the list.
So ladies.
Yes.
I'm just.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, wow. Yes. Wow. Way to tag team. This is what I deal with. This is my real life.
I never want the conversations to end. And hopefully our listeners feel the same way, because we still have so much to talk about.
Very true. Very true.
Thank you all so much for listening. We wish
going
you
on this
all
journey
the
with
best.
us.
Yeah, this journey. And we wish you all the best as you go through your candid and fruitful conversations, as you open up to those all around you.
Love it.
Until next time, it's been Danielle and Kia and Jessica.
That brings us to the end of this Canned Fruit podcast episode. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. We also want to thank our assistant producer, Brianna Javon from What's Good Productions. If you enjoyed our show, we invite you to connect with us on Instagram at cannedfruitpod and email us at cannedfruitpod@gmail.com. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts, and be sure to come back next time for another discussion as we continue to have candid and fruitful conversations. Until then, this is Jess, Kia, and Danielle, and don't forget to open up.